Good afternoon. I'm Alvin. My thesis title is Social Interactions in the Space, in the Space, in the Space. The book Notre-Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo, published in 1831, the antagonist Claude Frollo directs the eyes of his visitors to the massive silhouette of Notre-Dame Cathedral beyond the store, and said, "The book will kill architecture." For 19th century Hugo, the history of architecture is the history of writing. Before the technology of printing press was born, humans communicated through and wrote upon the solid stone of architecture. With the dissemination of books, architecture reached its own impasse. Nowadays, we live in multiple spaces simultaneously. We are always plugged in various devices. We roam through the sea of electronics, apps, social media, and games. We then interact with each other in a very different way than we did in the past. We receive information through multiple sources at the same time. We watch YouTube videos and text messages with someone sitting behind us in the lecture room. We selfie along a restaurant to show how great our dinner is on Facebook or Instagram. We even bury our head into the smartphones and tablets when we sit down with our beloved ones in front of the dining table. We seem to interact, communicate, and play less and less in the so-called real life /space. Many of us escape into the virtual life /space in social media and other electronic devices because they are quicker, easier, simpler, and maybe more aesthetic. The unique interactive experience in the real life /space supported by architecture is then absent. Architecture has reached its own impasse again. Will architecture's last function become merely the bolster of our electronic activities? Can architecture actively participate in this overlapping of spaces and social interactions? The thesis looks for a new form of architecture that can disconnect or connect people now living in different spaces, and asks the question, whether a new kind of conducive and fruitful interaction among people can occur in this new kind of space, in a space, in a space. If we look at the history of modern architecture, specific strategies were used to induce social interaction. For example, to interlock public and private. The project Common Bank headquarters by Foster and Partners is designed to leave open public spaces in the tower. The atriums and sky gardens, acting as destination and transition spaces, allow social interactions to happen. Another example could be to interweave access. For instance, in the IB Museum, different public and private accesses are intersecting with each other, creating areas with access for rest, stay, and gather. Another example could be to open the emptiness. The KIT workshop by Ishigami is a traditional way of inducing human interaction in a space. Space can be used differently based on different needs. The density of the columns defines also the hierarchy of certain spaces, which suggests different kinds of social interactions that can happen simultaneously within a larger space. Another example could be to multiply ways of use. Like Hertzberger's school design suggests multiple ways in which pupils may interact with and use them. Last but not least is to interlink various programs. In contemporary Japanese society, main Tokyo terminals are important points of the map on the map of social interaction, not only because of density, but also due to the various programs that attract different kinds of people coming for different purposes. However, with the popularization of social media and relevant electronic devices, simply applying these strategies may not be enough. If we look at the TGB library done by OMA in 1989, it is the project that everyone moves in between the solids of information. The diffuse cloud of information, digital data, is completely separate from the people in it. On the other side of the extreme, in the project, a situation made from loose and overlapping social and architectural aggregates by Moss. They announce that in our new situation, there is no city, no architecture, everything is floating and overlapping in space. Here I quote, "We see our memories, knowledge, and competence as metropolitan citizens, becoming physically and socially atrophied as we transfer our tasks." So what's next? I would say neither the TGB library nor the project of Moss seem to be able to reclaim the agency of architecture in our new kind of situation. Perhaps, for us, it's neither the cloud nor the storm, but we should just hack into the spaces and moments. Some of the strategies include seclusion, misalignment, and high contrast. And I would like to explain this a little bit more in the drawing on the wall. So in the drawing, the site is everywhere. In the shopping malls, offices, stations, hotels, and governmental buildings. Seclusive spaces are plotted in a conventional open plan. They are round spaces like chapels, isolated hallways, with only skylights. Structures and floors are aligned, but also misaligned. It's difficult to find a way. You are distracted. Your body experiences the common routine in a new way. There's high contrast between spaces, between lights, and between natural and man-made. So one moment you are in front of the screen, the next you are surrounded by trees. To end the presentation, I like to quote what Benjamin's words. Distraction is fundamentally social. Architecture has always offered a prototype of an artwork that is received in a state of distraction and through the collector. Perhaps the seclusion, the misaligned, the high contrast, or to say distracted, should be a new phenomenon in our everyday architecture. Thank you.
Can you show us in the drawing where the recent incidents of seclusion, big impasse, and
Misaligned. High contrast.
where show us.
So these secluded sort of like spaces are the seclusions. Buildings with buildings, and some of the structures are misaligned. The floor plates are also misaligned. This high contrast between the open space and maybe interior and the object.
What conditions does each of those imply for the social interaction? In seclusion, I can see what is the misalignment do for our alternative way of hacking into other.
So for me, it's more the idea that we routinely now live in spaces that's usually aligned and perpendicular. So you always know left, right, front, back. But in this kind of space, it's not. You have to figure out a way in different kinds.
But why would that mean? Well, actually, it's a question. Are you saying that those type of conditions would tend to lead you to interact more with another human being than being immersed in your, for example, personal device? The fact that they're misaligned and that you're disoriented.
Yes.
Why?
Because I think it's a way to call people's attention on the spaces you get to experience it in a different way, or to use it in a different way than before.
But you could also argue that just because you get lost, you would immediately go to the form to try to find your way, right? Because when you were talking, I was thinking of bazaars, because I've gotten lost. I mean, not bazaars like the old Islamic cities. They're very
Not like that or like that? Like the bazaars of
well,
the Islamic
it's similar to
cities.
what
Okay.
he wants to achieve because you don't know where you're going. At least as a foreigner, you get easily lost. I mean, I was in Morocco, it's about 30 years ago, and I was completely lost. And I wished I had a phone because it seemed really dangerous, and I was really nervous, and it was getting dark. And so, I mean, those are the images that got into my mind. I would use, if I had these machines.
Yeah, but in my mind, I don't think we should completely like get rid of the devices. That's not my position. But my question is how we can sort of reclaim both at the same time.
So, first of all, very nice presentation. You should be complimented for a very logical walk through efforts to make socially accessible spaces. I get really excited at that point, but I'm really concerned about the three things that you talked about, and you've already heard people challenging how they actually promote kind of recalibration to your senses and to your social being. And first of all, those qualities require a context to be understood. So if you're secluded, you have to be secluded from something. Right? And so I'm hoping that your thesis will try to do this in some sort of context that's really loaded, that represents the kind of thing you're trying to disrupt or interrogate. What were the two other ones besides seclusion? There was the misalignment issue. Okay. So the reason why I'm concerned about those categories, a lot of people have questioned whether these things really are enhanced reality or enhanced perception. And if you could characterize a lot of reaction to this, is that people almost instinctively want to go into the social realm, to feel like they're in a social space because they spend so much time in this. So there's already a desire to do that. And a lot of the design strategies have been to heighten the sensory loading of the space. And in a way, these categories are starting to do that. But we might rethink those in terms of the audible space, the space of smell, the space of touch, all of these other things beyond just abstractions about seclusion and misalignment and whatever. So I think you're onto something, but I think it has more dimensions to it than just the ones that you talked about, because we won't have a way of measuring these people were interrogated as to how that has taken you out of this space and put you into the space here where I can look eye to eye with pause and she can nod her head and not say a word. I'm getting the communication which you don't get off this, right? I'd rather not say. Sorry about that.
I telepathically.
Did you just send that? I'd rather not say.
I have this capacity
Sorry.
of doing that.
But you're very, very smart, so you should find your way out of this.
But I think one of the things you should look at is philosophers' texts that you reference here.
Yeah.
And they're talking about alienation, talking about the loss of control, the ability of the individual to not be an object. To a certain extent, you're increasing those senses through these ideas of seclusion, misalignment, and high contrast. So first of all, you should decide whether or not those are the mechanisms that you need for addressing these issues. And then consider whether or not you can heighten this ability to control the environment or reduce the alienation, reduce the disorientation.
Along those lines, I also completely agree with the fact that I think you have presented a theme that's very relevant. Your argument is, I think, something that has a very clear footing in what we're experiencing today and what we believe is going to only grow in the decades to come. So it is, I think, very well situated for contemporary discussions. And I also find that you've done a good job in terms of looking at precedents from a theoretical framework in how we can understand these subjects. I'm particularly interested in that sentence that you have there, neither the cloud nor the stone is to hack into spaces. What would that really mean? The analogy of the cloud, of course, we think data, big data being gathered, right? But it's also the idea of a material entity that's highly transient, right? A cloud is absolutely ephemeral and temporal by nature, unlike the symbol of the stone. And what does it mean to hack? So in the first sense, we immediately think to hack is to take apart pieces, but how do you understand that hacking from the perspective of the construction of isolation or integration? And can it be, going back to what you were mentioning related to senses, that actually isolation and hacking is much more of a subtractive process in which you're taking away many things that you can see or that you can hear or that you can smell, and by the subtraction you're able to augment continuity. So it's a reversal process, right? Because by augmenting that awareness of what that insulation is, you actually prompt the desire towards interaction. One of the reasons why, in an older train, for example, when you had a long trip, in older times, people would sit and would be reading their books, but eventually they would leave that book and really begin talking to someone that was inside. That's because you were overwhelmed with possibilities of what you could do.
Or enjoying the landscape.
I mean, I agree that it's well presented, and I like the drawing. But I would like you to strengthen your thesis firstly, because I mean, there's lots of people who are arguing that all these devices are actually intensifying the use of space. And if you think about San Francisco and Silicon Valley, a lot of people want to live in all these tech people want to go to San Francisco because it's a traditional urban environment. So examples like that don't help your thesis. And these people, and I have a personal experience where I live, where because this series of lofts, it's just one space, and those of us who live between 2 or 3 people, a lot of people go out and start speaking on the phone outside, so they don't interrupt
their
their
paradoxical
flips.
flips.
And so there's a lot of more people outside than there would be otherwise. So I think it's all kind of interesting. I agree with you, it's very current, but at the same time it's not clear that I mean, it would be best if you sort of killed these antitheses I'm coming up with, or showed examples of, yes, it does work to the benefit of public space or architectural space in some cases, but in many other cases it doesn't, and those are, do you understand?
I'm not sure that he's arguing that. I think you're arguing for a greater ambiguity in the space.
Right now,
that
it
can
is.
include all of this.
So then,
But then I think this drawing is in some ways less contextually comparing it to the other ones. I imagine the first drawing, the first budget with the staircourse, maybe to be more applicable to this because you have these nodes of particularity within a space open so that you can move back and forth into different types of relationships to people, relationships to the architecture. So I think the next exploration would be a drawing to figure out what are the ways you can represent these possibilities. This is too easy of a first pass.
can I just add one other thing? I know we have to go on, but I think you should ask yourself, using some other examples. For instance, if you went into a Zumthor space, which is highly sensual, his chapel, his baths, what does that, how does that modify your thesis? When you suddenly go into a place that is very heightened in certain ways, and see if that opens up some explorations for you, because I think that might shift slightly the direction of your thesis. And you could pick other spaces, because really the thing to do is when we're here, right? And we seek, and you can see it, this desire to enrich our full being in other ways. And so maybe seclusion and misalignment and these other things are not necessarily what we're searching for. I just think you ought to answer that question because it'll be posed, I think, in relation to your thesis.
Move on.
Yeah,
20 minutes is.
it's not enough. These are,
I
but
will
a
give
great
conclusive remarks each
presentation.
time,
Really.
but
Are we looking at the first?
we're moving